How lockdowns bolstered an industrial cartel. Now we know that from the lockdowns, a lot of small businesses closed the doors and closed their shutters and never came back. A lot of small businesses weren't able to make it through the lockdowns. So we're gonna talk a little bit about that and how a lot of the big businesses got even bigger and stronger. But before we get started, go ahead and hit that like button, share this out so we can get this information out there. Subscribe if you're not already a subscriber, and hit that alarm bell so you know when I'm putting out new stuff. Also, check out my link tree in the description. It has a link to my Patreon where I talk about things I can't talk about here. There's also a link to my Instagram and my merch store. Also, check out jjthepsychotherapist.com for news. All right, let's talk about this news. During the lockdowns, we witnessed a distressing sight of boarded up local shops while big box stores like Walmart, Kroger, Whole Foods, and Home Depot remain open without much scrutiny. Small businesses, for some inexplicable reason, were deemed non-essential, while the larger chains were deemed essential, resulting in significant advantage for these corporate giants. Consequently, the pandemic period only served to make these large companies richer and more powerful, while millions of small businesses were left utterly devastated. Despite the countless tragic stories of family businesses being destroyed by the lockdowns, these narratives were largely ignored by the major media outlets. Instead of receiving the attention they deserve, the focus seemed to be on the success stories of big corporations. Even the government loans provided through the Paycheck Protection Program, or PPP, which were later mostly forgiven, could not compensate for the immense losses suffered by small businesses. Additionally, the disruption caused by the pandemic and a severe impact on had a severe impact on their supply chains, as they either struggled to find customers or were absorbed by the larger corporations. Although there are no concrete figures, it is estimated that 25 to 40% of small businesses permanently closed, leading to shattered dreams and the loss of millions of jobs. And despite the frantic efforts to hire new employees, the retail trade and hospitality sectors declared non-essential have struggled to recover in terms of employment. In contrast, the information sector, deemed essential across the board, has thrived and expanded. This disparity further highlights the industrial advantage gained by large corporations at the expense of smaller competitors. I call it corporate Marxism. The lockdowns represent a grave assault on commercial freedom, favoring the formation of industrial cartels within the information sector. This contradicts the ideal of competition that the American economy is built on. Instead of fostering a competitive free market, the lockdowns undermine property rights, free enterprise, and the principles of a competitive economy. The regulators justified their actions by claiming to prioritize public health. They issued various directives regarding ventilation, social distancing, plexiglass barriers, capacity restrictions, and eventually vaccine mandates. These mandates predominantly benefit large corporations, while smaller businesses struggle to comply due to financial constraints or the fear of alienating their employees with vaccine requirements. One example is the impact of capacity restrictions. A restaurant with the capacity to serve 350 to 500 people, such as Golden Corral, would not be significantly affected by a 50% capacity limit, as these establishments rarely reach full capacity even in normal times. However, a family-owned coffee shop across the street with only 10 seats would be devastated by the same restriction. Cutting their capacity in half would make it nearly impossible for them to survive. The devastating requirements also favored larger businesses, as only they had the resources to implement and enforce such measures. It's just crazy that they did all this, and large corporations did not voice significant complaints about lockdowns because their bottom line were swelling while their competitors were being crushed. This aligns with Milton Friedman's observation that big business is often the greatest enemy of genuine capitalism. They prefer the formation of industrial cartels, of a phenomenon that was exacerbated during the lockdowns. Looking back at commercial history, we see that totalitarian societies such as the Soviet Union and fascist regimes in Germany, Italy, Spain, and France thrive on industrial cartels. These societies emphasize the concept of essential and non-essential businesses, similar to what transpired during the lockdowns. The prevailing intellectual opinion of the 1930s even celebrated the cartelization of industries as more efficient than competitive free markets. Today, the World Economic Forum's global perspective seems to align closely with the principles of cartels. The case of Amazon is particularly intriguing. The company significantly benefited from the lockdowns, while its founder and CEO, Jeff Bezos, also owned the Washington Post, which actively advocated for the continuation of lockdown measures. While we can acknowledge Amazon's contributions during the pandemic, the involvement of its CEO in promoting and prolonging the lockdowns raises some concern. Another example is Thomas Pueyo, an educational entrepreneur who authored the viral article "The Hammer and the Dance" in March of 2022, which strongly advocated for lockdown measures. Pueyo and the industry he represents profited greatly from lockdowns. Although companies that benefited from the lockdowns have faced some challenges due to the higher interest rate, they still remain significantly larger than before the pandemic. They will undoubtedly cling to their power and market dominance through any means possible. To restore competition and dislodge the corporate giants, we can draw inspiration from post-war Germany. Ludwig Erhard, the finance minister at the time, faced substantial resistance when he attempted to dismantle industrial cartels and introduce competition. However, he preserved and implemented the measure that prioritized decentralization, deregulation, tax cuts, protection of property rights, elimination of subsidies, and the promotion of economic freedom. These efforts resulted in the, quote, German economic miracle and made Germany the most prosperous nation in Europe, contrasting with the more socialist and corporativist approaches adopted by the UK during the same period. Industrial cartelization has been the norm throughout history, with exceptions during the liberal era. The 20th century witnessed the rise of public-private partnerships and the regulatory state benefiting large corporations at the expense of small businesses and startups. The introduction of digital commerce in the 20th century promised a new era of commercial freedom, only to be abruptly halted by the lockdowns of 2020. Paradoxically, these lockdowns, often considered progressive, were actually conservative in the traditional sense, serving to preserve and consolidate the power of the establishment. It is crucial to advocate for reparations for small businesses and the restoration of genuine commercial competition, taking inspiration from the post-war German model. What we need now is our own version of Ludwig Erhard's and our own economic miracle. We must prioritize decentralization, deregulation, tax cuts, protection of property rights, elimination of subsidies, and the promotion of economic freedom. It is imperative that we recognize freedom for consumers and the freedom to work as invaluable basic rights. Democracy and a free economy are intrinsically linked, just as dictatorship and state controls are interconnected. By learning from history and implementing policies that encourage genuine competition, we can dislodge the power of corporate giants and restore true commercial freedom. But let me know what you think. Leave your comments down below. Like, share, and subscribe, and check out jjthepsychotherapist.com for the latest in news. Until next time, peace.